Alexander wore 3 stands at the corner of Cedar and Main, his designer shoes already scuffed from the cracked sidewalk. The working-class neighborhood of Millbrook stretches before him, a maze of modest brick buildings and local businesses that couldn't be more different from his usual haunts. In Manhattan's Upper East Side, he adjusts the strap of his deliberately worn backpack, containing nothing but essentials and a few carefully selected items that wouldn't raise suspicion. If you love your family and want to listen to amazing and shocking stories, click on subscribe and avoid 20 years of bad luck in your life. The morning rush surrounds him, construction workers grabbing coffee, parents walking their children to school, elderly couples taking early walks. Alex observes each interaction, noting how people greet each other by name, how they pause to chat despite their obvious hurry. It's a stark contrast to the impersonal nods exchanged in corporate elevators. His new apartment sits above a family-owned deli, a 1-bedroom walk-up that his father would consider uninhabitable. But that's exactly the point. The lease, signed under his new identity, represents his first step toward independence. He'd spent weeks crafting his backstory. Alex Thompson, 28, recently moved from Pittsburgh after a company downsizing. Simple, verifiable enough to avoid suspicion, yet vague enough to prevent detailed questioning. At Johnson's Hardware, the bell above the door announces his arrival. The store smells of sawdust and metal, with narrow aisles packed floor to ceiling with tools and supplies. Tom Johnson, a man in his 60s with calloused hands and honest eyes, interviews him between helping customers. Alex finds himself genuinely engaging, letting his natural curiosity about the products override his practiced responses. Over the next few weeks, his co-workers, Mike, a former construction worker with endless practical knowledge, and Diana, a part-time college student who knows every inventory item by heart, become more than just colleagues. During lunch breaks, they share stories about their lives. Mike talks about his daughter's college applications, while Diana vents about her challenging physics professor. Alex contributes carefully edited anecdotes from his own life, translating his experiences into relatable terms. The store's routine begins to feel natural. He learns to mix, paint, cut keys, and recommend the right tools for various projects. His hands develop calluses from stocking shelves and handling rough materials. Each small accomplishment feels more meaningful than any business deal he'd closed in his previous life. Then, one Tuesday morning, she walks in. The bell chimes as Emma Matthews pushes through the door, arms full of construction paper and a determined look on her face. Her kindergarten class needs supplies for an art project, and she's already running late. Alex notices everything at once. Her practical clothes, the paint stains on her fingers, the way she tucks her hair behind her ear when concentrating. Their interaction is brief, but electric. Emma explains her needs with passionate gestures, describing her students' excitement about their upcoming art show. Alex finds himself suggesting alternatives to her original list, cheaper options that would work better for small hands. She lights up at his ideas, scribbling notes in a small notebook she pulls from her bag. As he rings up her purchase, their fingers brush briefly. The touch sends an unexpected jolt through him, and he fumbles with the change. Emma laughs, a genuine, unguarded sound that makes him realize how long it's been since he's heard anything so authentic in his former social circles. After she leaves, Alex stands at the counter, receipt still in hand, fighting an unfamiliar sensation. For the first time since starting this experiment in anonymity, he feels the weight of his deception. The ease with which Emma shared her passion for teaching, her obvious dedication to her students, and her unguarded interactions make his carefully constructed facade feel suddenly fragile. That evening, as he walks home through streets that are becoming increasingly familiar, Alex passes the local community center, where Emma mentioned she teaches. Through the window, he catches a glimpse of her setting up for an evening art class, surrounded by easels and smiling students. He quickens his pace, but not before the image burns itself into his memory. a snapshot of the authentic life he's trying to understand. In his sparse apartment, Alex sits at his second-hand kitchen table, eating takeout from the deli downstairs. His phone buzzes with messages from his family's business empire, updates about mergers, property acquisitions, and board meetings he's supposed to be attending. He silences the notifications, focusing instead on the distant sound of children playing in the courtyard below. For the first time in his life, he feels both completely out of place and exactly where he needs to be. The community park becomes their unofficial meeting spot, a neutral ground where Alex and Emma's friendship blossoms over shared lunch breaks. Emma spreads her collection of student artwork across the weathered picnic table, each piece accompanied by an animated story about its creator. Alex finds himself drawn into her world, where success is measured in crayon drawings and breakthrough moments of childhood creativity. "This one," Emma says, holding up a watercolor painting of what might be a tree or possibly a green giraffe, "is from Marcus. 3 weeks ago, he wouldn't even pick up a brush. Now, he's our class's most enthusiastic painter." Her eyes shine with pride, and Alex notices how she treats each artwork as if it were a masterpiece worthy of a gallery. Their conversations flow easily, touching on everything except the past Alex claims he's trying to leave behind. Emma shares her vision for an arts-focused learning center, one that would combine traditional education with creative expression. Her hands move expressively as she describes converted warehouse spaces and sunlit studios filled with children discovering their artistic voices. "The problem is," she sighs, folding up a particularly vibrant finger painting, "commercial real estate in this area is either run down beyond repair or priced for luxury development." Alex's stomach tightens at this, knowing exactly why property values have been climbing steadily in this neighborhood. He starts volunteering at Emma's afternoon art classes, initially just to spend more time with her, but soon finding genuine joy in helping young students discover their creativity. His hands, once accustomed to signing contracts and handling golf clubs, now guide small fingers through pottery techniques and help construct papier-mâché sculptures. During one such class, while helping a young girl named Sophia with her clay project, Alex catches Emma watching him. There's something in her expression, warmth mixed with curiosity, that makes him both yearn to tell her everything and terrified of shattering this newfound connection. The community center becomes his second home. The ancient coffee maker in the break room, the squeaky floorboard by the supply closet, the wall of student artwork that grows more colorful each week. All of it feels more real than the corporate boardrooms he once inhabited. He learns the names of every regular student, their preferred art supplies, their small triumphs and setbacks. One evening, as they clean up after a particularly messy painting session, Emma mentions the upcoming neighborhood development meeting. "They're discussing the new luxury complex project," she says, scrubbing dried paint from a table, "the one that's threatening to push out half the local businesses." Alex focuses intently on organizing paintbrushes, his chest tight with knowledge he can't share. "Sometimes I wonder," Emma continues, unaware of his discomfort, "how people can make decisions that affect entire communities without ever really knowing them." She stops cleaning, looking out the window at the street where elderly Mr. Chen is closing his corner store for the night, where Mrs. Rodriguez's flower shop still has its lights on, where countless lives intersect in the daily rhythm of neighborhood life. Alex watches her watching the neighborhood, seeing it through her eyes, not as a development opportunity or a profit margin, but as a living, breathing ecosystem of human connections. The weight of his family's involvement in the very changes she fears sits heavily on his shoulders. Their relationship deepens through shared moments of simple joy, improvised art projects with whatever supplies they can find, late-night conversations about dreams and fears, quiet walks through neighborhood streets where Emma seems to know every resident's story. She introduces him to her world with an openness that makes his necessary deceptions feel increasingly painful. During one of their walks, They pass a boarded-up building that Emma especially loves. "Can't you just see it?" she asks, gesturing at the faded brick facade. Children's artwork in all the windows, music floating out to the street, a place where creativity isn't just encouraged but celebrated. Her dream is so vivid, so pure in its intention, that Alex finds himself mentally calculating renovation costs and zoning requirements before catching himself. The growing tension between his two worlds becomes harder to ignore. Each morning, before heading to the hardware store, he checks his secure email account, scanning reports about his family's company's latest acquisitions. The same company that, he now realizes, threatens to reshape the very community that has shown him what genuine connection feels like. As autumn approaches, Emma begins planning a community art festival, determined to showcase the neighborhood's creative spirit. Alex throws himself into helping, partly out of genuine enthusiasm, and partly to quiet his conscience. During their planning sessions, Emma occasionally mentions concerning rumors about property developers and corporate interests, each word unknowingly cutting closer to Alex's carefully guarded truth. Their final festival planning meeting runs late into the evening. As they walk back through the quieting streets, Emma stops suddenly, turning to face him. "You know what I love about you, Alex?" she says, using the name that no longer feels like just a cover story. "You see the potential in things, in people, just like I do." The streetlight catches the trust in her eyes, and Alex feels the weight of his deception more heavily than ever before. Emma's investigation begins innocently enough, a casual internet search during her lunch break about the neighborhood's proposed development. Her laptop screen flickers with news articles and public records as she picks at her sandwich, barely noticing when crumbs fall onto her keyboard. The Worth Development Corporation appears in nearly every document, its presence looming over the neighborhood like a shadow. She creates a folder on her desktop labeled Community Research, not knowing it will soon become an obsession. Between teaching classes and planning art projects, she digs deeper into public records, environmental impact studies, and city council meeting minutes. Something about the development plans doesn't add up. The timing, the rushed approvals, the overlooked environmental assessments. At the hardware store, Alex notices the dark circles under her eyes, the way she clutches her coffee cup like a lifeline. "Just doing some research," she explains when he asks, but her usual warmth is tempered by distraction. She doesn't notice how he tenses when she mentions finding concerning documents about Worth Development's past projects. During one of their evening walks, Emma shares her discoveries. "They've done this before," she says, her voice tight with anger. "Buy up properties, promise community improvements, then price out all the original residents. And the environmental violations." She pulls out her phone, showing Alex photographs of previously developed neighborhoods, communities transformed beyond recognition, local businesses replaced by high-end boutiques. Alex feels his careful construction of lies beginning to crack. "Maybe there's more to the story," he suggests weakly, knowing his words sound hollow. "Corporate development isn't always black and white." Emma looks at him sharply, and he sees something new in her expression: suspicion. "That's odd," she says slowly. "That's almost exactly what the Worth Corporation spokesperson said in their press release." She stops walking, turning to face him fully. "You seem to know a lot about corporate development strategies for someone who worked in a manufacturing plant in Pittsburgh." The moment hangs between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Alex scrambles for a response, but each potential explanation feels like another betrayal. Before he can speak, Emma's phone buzzes with an email alert. A contact at the city planning office has sent her more documents. In the following days, Emma's investigation intensifies. She starts attending community organizing meetings, taking notes, connecting with other neighborhoods affected by Worth Development's projects. Alex watches her transform from a passionate teacher into a determined activist, all while carrying the crushing weight of his secrets. During her free periods at school, Emma makes calls to environmental agencies and former residents of worth-developed areas. Each conversation adds another piece to a puzzle that paints an increasingly damning picture. She doesn't notice how her students' artwork begins to reflect her preoccupation. Their normally bright colors turning darker, their subjects more serious. One evening, while helping Emma organize her research at the community center, Alex spots a familiar name in her notes. Sarah Worth, his sister, appears in an article about the company's board members. His hand shakes as he passes the paper back to Emma, praying she doesn't notice his reaction. But Emma's investigative skills have sharpened over the weeks. "You know something," she says, not as a question, but as a realization. "Every time I mention the Worth Corporation, you get this look, like you're carrying something heavy." She spreads her research across the table, a web of connections, violations, and suspicious patterns that she's pieced together. "What aren't you telling me, Alex?" The fluorescent lights of the community center buzz overhead as Alex struggles to find words. Each potential response feels like choosing between different types of betrayal. Before he can answer, Emma's laptop pings with a new email. Her eyes scan the screen, widening as she reads. "Someone just sent me internal documents," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Environmental reports that were buried, community impact studies that were ignored. She looks up at Alex, and he sees the moment something clicks in her mind. These were never made public. Someone on the inside must have. Her voice trails off as she studies his face with new understanding. The next day at the hardware store, Alex notices Emma's usual morning visit doesn't happen. By lunch, his phone remains silent. No messages about art supplies needed or funny stories about her students. The absence feels deliberate, heavy with unasked questions and unspoken accusations. When he checks his secure email that evening, a new message from his father waits in his inbox. The subject line reads, "Urgent Community Leak Investigation." Alex's hands grow cold as he reads about the company's internal investigation into leaked documents. The carefully separated worlds he's been maintaining are about to collide, and he's standing at the impact point with no shelter in sight. The call from his father comes at 6:43 a.m., while Alex is preparing for his morning shift at the hardware store. Howard Worth, III's name flashing on his phone screen feels like an invasion of his carefully constructed new reality. The Richardson project needs attention. His father's voice carries the familiar tone of non-negotiable command. "The board meeting is next week, and your absence has been noted." The pause carries weighted implications. Whatever little experiment you're conducting needs to end now. Alex stands in his modest kitchen, the morning light casting shadows across the second-hand furniture he's grown oddly attached to. His father continues, detailing the project's importance, the investors' expectations, the family legacy at stake. Each word feels like another brick in a wall being built between his two lives. "The community opposition is becoming problematic," Howard says. "Someone's been feeding them information. Internal documents have leaked." The accusation in his father's tone is clear. "I need you back in the office today." "I can't," Alex responds, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. "There are things here that need my attention." He thinks of Emma, of the community center, of Mr. Chun's corner store where he buys his morning coffee. Things. His father's laugh is sharp. "What could possibly be more important than your responsibility to this family?" The question hangs in the air, heavy with generations of expectations. The rest of Alex's morning passes in a blur of hardware store tasks, his father's words echoing in his mind. During his lunch break, he notices Emma entering the local cafe across the street. She's carrying her laptop and research folders, her expression focused and determined. He watches as she meets with what appears to be a local journalist, spreading documents across the table between them. That evening, Emma appears at the hardware store just before closing. The usually warm space feels charged with tension as she approaches the counter. Her laptop is clutched against her chest, like a shield. "We need to talk," she says, her voice steady, but her fingers gripping the laptop tightly. "About worth development. About you." The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across her face. "About why someone with your supposed background knows corporate legal terminology and can quote development statistics from memory." Alex looks around the empty store, at the familiar aisles where he's found unexpected purpose over the past months. "Emma, I can explain. Can you?" She opens her laptop, turning it to face him. On the screen is an old photograph from a charity gala. Alexander worth 3 shaking hands with the mayor, his father beaming proudly beside him. The image is dated just 6 months ago. "Because I'm having trouble understanding how the heir to Worth Development ended up working in a hardware store in the very neighborhood his family plans to destroy." The silence between them feels endless. Alex reaches for words, but every practiced explanation, every carefully constructed story falls away. He sees the hurt in Emma's eyes, the betrayal replacing the warmth he'd grown to cherish. "Was any of it real?" she asks, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your interest in the community center, in my classes, in..." She stops, unable to finish the question. "Everything I felt, everything I feel is real." Alex starts, but Emma cuts him off. "How can I believe that? You've been lying since the day we met." She closes her laptop with a decisive snap. "All this time, while I've been fighting to protect this community, you've been what? Studying us. Gathering intelligence for your family's project." Alex steps around the counter, reaching for her arm, but she backs away. "Emma, please. It started that way, but it changed. I changed. Did you?" Her laugh is hollow. "Because right now, all I see is a billionaire playing poverty tourist, treating our lives like some sort of social experiment." She moves toward the door, then pauses. "You know what the worst part is? I actually thought you understood. I thought you saw the value in what we're trying to preserve here." "I do understand," Alex insists, desperation creeping into his voice. "That's why I've stayed. That's why I can't go back to what your real life." Emma's hand rests on the door handle. "While you've been playing shop clerk, real people's lives are at stake. People who trusted you, who welcomed you into their community." She pulls the door open, the bell chiming discordantly. "I trusted you." As she walks away, Alex feels the weight of both his worlds crushing in on him. His phone buzzes in his pocket. Another message from his father, no doubt. Through the store window, he watches Emma's retreating figure, her shoulders set with determination. He knows she's heading to the community center, where she'll continue her fight against his family's company, against him. The hardware store's familiar confines suddenly feel like a prison of his own making. Every tool, every shelf, every memory of genuine connection now tainted by the deception at its core. As he begins the closing routine, counting the register, sweeping the floors, he realizes he's reached a point of no return. The carefully constructed wall between his two lives has crumbled, and he's standing in the rubble, forced to finally choose a side. Sarah Worth's text arrives at midnight. "I know where you are. We need to talk." The message glows on Alex's phone screen as he sits in his darkened apartment, surrounded by the remnants of his double life. Within an hour, she's at his door, her designer coat incongruous against the building's worn hallway. "Nice place," Sarah says, stepping inside. Her attempt at sarcasm falls flat, her voice carrying an unfamiliar tremor. Up close, Alex sees what the society pages would miss. The slight shake in her hands, the shadows under her carefully made-up eyes. Very authentic. Sarah moves through his apartment, running her fingers along second-hand furniture, examining the art supplies scattered across his kitchen table. "Dad's on a rampage," she says finally, turning to face him. The board is asking questions. The leaked documents. She pauses, studying his face. "You've seen them, haven't you?" "Emma found them," Alex admits, watching his sister's reaction carefully. "She's been investigating the company." "Emma," Sarah repeats the name, testing it. "The teacher, The one, you. She stops, sinking onto his worn couch. God, Alex, what are you doing here, really? Before he can answer, Sarah's composed facade cracks. Her hands shake as she reaches into her bag, pulling out a bottle of prescription medication. You're not the only one with secrets, she says, placing the bottle on his coffee table. Anxiety, depression, the family legacy isn't just about real estate, is it? Alex sits beside his sister, the couch sagging beneath their combined weight. In the dim light, she looks younger, more vulnerable, like the little girl who used to hide in his room during their parents' arguments about business expansion and market dominance. The pressure never stops. Sarah continues, her voice barely above a whisper. Be perfect, be successful, be worthy of the worth name. She laughs bitterly at her own wordplay. I've been seeing the documents, Alex. The ones Emma found. They're just the beginning. What do you mean? Dad's been cutting corners for years. Environmental regulations, safety codes, community protection laws. They're all just obstacles to be overcome. She pulls out her phone, scrolling through files. I've been collecting evidence. At first, it was just to understand why I felt so wrong about everything. But it's worse than we thought. Alex watches his sister's hands tremble as she shows him document after document, proof of systematic violations, of communities destroyed, of lives appended for profit. Why are you showing me this? He asks, though he already knows the answer. Because you got out, Sarah says simply. You found something real here. I see it in your face when you talk about the hardware store, about the community center, about Emma. She takes a shaky breath. I need you to know you're not crazy for wanting something different. The siblings sit in silence, the weight of their family's legacy pressing down on them. Through his window, Alex can see the lights of the community center still on. Emma working late again, no doubt, fighting against the very empire he was born to inherit. She hates me, Alex says finally. Emma, she found out who I am. Sarah reaches for his hand, a gesture of comfort they haven't shared since childhood. She hates what our name represents, she corrects. But the person you've become here, that's who you really are, Alex. I've never seen you more alive. The sound of distant sirens fills the silence between them. Sarah's phone buzzes, their father's name appearing on the screen. She silences it with practiced efficiency. I can't go back, Alex says, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. Not to that life, not to pretending everything we do is justified by profit margins and shareholder value. I know, Sarah replies, standing to leave. At the door, she pauses. The board meeting is next week. Dad expects you there. He's planning to announce the acceleration of the development project. She meets his eyes. Whatever you're going to do it soon. After Sarah leaves, Alex stands at his window, watching the community center's lights finally go dark. Emma emerges, her figure small against the streetlights, clutching her research files. He thinks about the first time he saw her there, passionate and purposeful, unaware that she would become the catalyst for his transformation. His phone buzzes again, an email from his father's assistant with the board meeting agenda. The Richardson project is listed as the primary topic, with a note about community, opposition, resolution, strategies. Alex's stomach turns as he imagines the clinical discussion of how to dismantle the very community that has shown him what genuine connection feels like. In his tiny kitchen, Alex makes coffee in the cheap machine he bought from Johnson's Hardware. His father's words about playing shop clerk echoing in his mind, but it's Sarah's trembling hands he sees. Her quiet desperation, a mirror of his own past, struggles with the weight of the worth name. The decision he needs to make has never been clearer, but the path forward has never been more complicated. The community center's main room, usually filled with children's art and laughter, transforms into a war room on a Wednesday evening. Folding chairs arranged in tight rows face a projection screen where Emma stands, her research displayed in stark black and white. The faces before her represent every corner of the neighborhood, Mr. Chen from the corner store, Mrs. Rodriguez from the flower shop. Teachers, parents, local business owners, all united by a common threat. Worth Development isn't just planning to renovate, Emma explains, her voice steady despite her awareness of Alex standing at the back of the room. They're planning to evacuate. Every lease, termination, every property acquisition, it's all part of a larger strategy. She clicks through slides showing similar patterns in other neighborhoods. Her investigation now supported by dozens of community members who've come forward with their own stories. From his position near the door, Alex watches the community he's grown to love transform into a resistance movement. He sees Tom Johnson from the hardware store taking detailed notes, Diana recording the meeting on her phone, Mike organizing sign-up sheets for protest shifts. The double life he's been living suddenly feels less like a deception and more like a responsibility. He knows things they need to know. Mrs. Rodriguez stands, her voice carrying years of determination. My family has owned our shop for 3 generations. My grandmother planted those roses herself. They think they can just put a price tag on that. Murmurs of agreement ripple through the crowd. We've started a legal fund, Emma continues, gesturing to a spreadsheet. And we're gathering signatures for an injunction against the development plan. She pauses, making eye contact with various community members. But we need more. We need inside information about their strategies, their weaknesses. The room erupts in discussion, plans forming organically. Mr. Chen offers his store as a meeting point for protest organizers. A local lawyer volunteers pro bono services. Teachers from Emma's school propose involving their students in an art campaign to raise awareness. Alex steps forward, his heart pounding. I might be able to help, he begins, feeling all eyes turn to him. Emma's expression hardens, but she doesn't stop him. I have connections, information about their development patterns, their pressure points. The silence that follows is heavy with unspoken questions. Emma's gaze pierces through him, a mix of suspicion and desperate hope. What kind of connections? She asks, though he suspects she already knows the answer. Before he can respond, Diana stands up, her phone displaying a breaking news alert. They're moving up the timeline, she announces, her voice shaking. Worth Development just announced an emergency board meeting for next week. They're fast-tracking the project. The room erupts in panic. Alex watches as years of community life flash before everyone's eyes. Childhood memories, family businesses, homes passed down through generations, all threatened by his family's pursuit of profit. The weight of his identity presses down on him like a physical force. Emma takes control of the chaos, her teacher's authority cutting through the noise. This is exactly why we need to act now, she declares. We have 1 week to show them we won't be erased. She begins organizing people into groups, media outreach, legal research, protest coordination. As the meeting breaks into focused clusters, Alex finds himself approached by a young artist who runs classes at the community center. The children are scared, she tells him quietly. They keep asking if their art will have to come down, if they'll have to find new places to paint. The simple statement hits him harder than any corporate presentation ever has. Emma watches this interaction from across the room, her expression softening slightly. She makes her way over to them, professional distance warring with personal history. You said you have information, she says to Alex, careful to keep her voice neutral. What exactly are you offering? The moment stretches between them, filled with the buzz of community activism around them. Alex thinks of Sarah's trembling hands, of his father's ruthless efficiency, of the lives being treated as mere obstacles to profit. Everything, he answers finally. I'm offering everything I know. The meeting continues, late into the night. Plans are made, roles assigned, strategies developed. Alex finds himself in a unique position, understanding both the corporate machine they're fighting and the human cost of its operation. He watches Emma coordinate the resistance, her passion igniting hope in people who've grown used to feeling powerless. As the crowd begins to thin, Mr. Chen approaches Alex with a cup of tea from his store. Sometimes, the older man says quietly, we must choose between what is easy and what is right. He gestures around the room, at the remnants of the meeting, at the community pulling together. You seem to understand this. Yes. Alex accepts the tea, its warmth seeping into his hands, like truth seeping into his conscience. Through the community center's windows, he can see the neighborhood settling into evening, lights coming on in homes that might soon be demolished, families gathering for dinners in spaces marked for modernization, children finishing homework in rooms scheduled for renovation. The choice before him has never been clearer nor more difficult. His phone buzzes with another message from his father's office. Final details for the board meeting, where he's expected to stand with his family against the very community that has shown him what family truly means. The Worth Development headquarters rises above the city like a glass and steel monument to power. Alex stands in his old office for the first time in months, his hardware store uniform replaced by a tailored suit that feels like a costume. The city stretches below him, the neighborhood he's come to love barely visible in the distance. Howard Worth EI's arrival is preceded by his presence, the subtle straightening of secretaries' postures, the hushed conversations, the atmospheric shift that signals power. He enters Alex's office without knocking, authority wrapped around him like armor. I assume this little sabbatical of yours is over, Howard says, not bothering with He drops a folder on Alex's desk. Surveillance photos of the community center meeting, of Alex with Emma, of their planning sessions. Did you really think we wouldn't monitor the situation? Alex picks up the photos, seeing his dual life documented in clinical detail. You've been watching me. Of course we have. You're a Worth. His father moves to the window, gazing out at his empire. This company, this legacy, it's not just about profit. It's about vision, progress. Sometimes that means making hard decisions. Destroying communities isn't progress, Alex responds, his voice steady despite his racing heart. These people, their lives are being improved. Howard cuts in. We're bringing development, modernization. In 5 years, they'll thank us. He turns, fixing Alex with the stare that once cowed board members. Unless someone interferes, someone with inside knowledge, someone working with that teacher and her little resistance movement. The threat hangs in the air between them. Alex thinks of Emma's determined face at the community meeting, of Sarah's trembling hands, of Mr. Chun's quiet wisdom. The environmental reports, he says carefully, the violations, the covered-up studies, necessary compromises. Howard waves his hand dismissively. The board understands this. The shareholders demand it. Your sister. He pauses, something flickering across his face. Sarah needs to learn this too. Her emotional instability. It's made her vulnerable to manipulation. Anger flares in Alex's chest. She's not unstable. She's human. She sees what this company really does to people. People, Howard laughs. The sound sharp and cold. Look out there. He gestures at the city. Do you see people? I see opportunities, assets, liabilities. He picks up one of the surveillance photos. Emma leading the community meeting. Speaking of liabilities, leave her out of this, Alex says, his voice low and dangerous. She's already involved herself. Howard slides another document across the desk. A detailed dossier on Emma. Quite the activist, your little teacher. It would be a shame if her school board learned about some of her more radical activities. The threat ignites something in Alex he didn't know existed. A protective fury that burns through years of conditioned obedience. You can't threaten your way out of this anymore, he says, standing to face his father. The community knows. They have evidence. Real evidence. Evidence can disappear. Communities can be persuaded. Howard straightens his tie, a gesture Alex has seen countless times before board meetings. The question is, son, which side of this are you going to be on when it all comes down? A moment of clarity strikes Alex. You're scared, he realizes aloud. Not of the protests or the legal challenges. You're scared of the truth getting out. About all of it. Howard's expression hardens. Choose your next words very carefully, Alexander. Family loyalty only extends so far. Family loyalty. Alex laughs, the sound foreign in his corporate office. Is that what you call monitoring your children? Threatening people they care about? Dismissing Sarah's struggles as weakness? Everything I've done has been for this family. No, Alex counters, his voice firm. Everything you've done has been for this company. There's a difference. He reaches into his jacket, pulling out his own folder. Copies of Sarah's collected evidence, documentation of years of violations and cover-ups. And I'm choosing family, my real family. Howard's face reddens. If you walk out that door, if you side with them, you're done. No trust fund, no inheritance. No, what about Sarah? Alex interrupts. What about her inheritance, her future? Or does family loyalty only apply to those who fall in line? The question hangs in the air, heavy with decades of unspoken truth. Through the office window, a protest can be seen forming in the street below. Community members with signs, their voices carrying faintly through the soundproofed glass. The board meets tomorrow, Howard says finally, his voice cold. Make your choice before then. He moves to the door, then pauses. And Alexander, remember, some choices can't be unmade. Left alone in his office, Alex looks down at the protest growing below. He spots Emma in the crowd, her presence a beacon of authenticity in the shadow of Worth Development's tower. His phone buzzes, a message from Sarah. Be careful, Dad's not bluffing. Another message follows quickly, but neither am I. I have more documents. When you're ready, they're yours. Alex removes his tie, the gesture symbolic of a larger unraveling. On his desk, the surveillance photos stare up at him, evidence of his double life that now feels more like documentation of his awakening. Outside, the protesters' chants grow louder, their unified voice reaching even this high above the street. The choice before him is clear, but the path forward is lined with consequences he's only beginning to understand. The press conference room at the Millbrook Community Center buzzes with an energy that makes the fluorescent lights seem dim in comparison. Local reporters fill the folding chairs, their cameras trained on the podium where Emma stands. Her research spread before her like a roadmap of corporate corruption. Alex watches from the wings, his heart pounding with each passing moment. For months, we've gathered evidence of systematic violations by Worth Development. Emma begins, her teacher's voice carrying clear authority. Today, we're presenting proof of environmental negligence, community displacement, and corporate corruption that spans decades. She clicks through slides, each one revealing another layer of his family's carefully constructed facade. Alex checks his phone. Dozens of missed calls from his father's office, from board members, from corporate lawyers. The board meeting is scheduled to start in exactly 1 hour. His presence is expected there, not here, not standing in solidarity with the very people his family planned to displace. Emma continues, her presentation methodical and damning. These documents show a pattern of deliberate environmental regulation violations. She pauses, her hands steady as she changes slides. But perhaps the most compelling testimony will come from someone who has seen it all from the inside. The room stills. Alex feels the weight of every camera, every expectant breath. His steps toward the podium feel both heavy and liberating. The murmur that ripples through the crowd when they recognize him. Alexander, Worth III, heir to the very empire they're fighting, sounds like breaking chains. My name, he says into the microphone, his voice carrying the weight of truth, is Alexander Worth III, and everything Ms. Matthews has presented is true. The camera flashes intensify. I know because I've seen it firsthand. I've been part of it, until I wasn't. He pulls out Sarah's files, adding them to Emma's evidence. Our company hasn't just bent rules, we've broken them, systematically, repeatedly, with full knowledge of the human cost. His hands don't shake as he shares documents that will destroy his family's reputation. They feel steady for the first time in years. The Richardson Project isn't about urban renewal, he continues. It's about profit at any cost. The environmental studies were buried because they showed toxic levels of contamination that would require millions in cleanup costs. The community impact reports were ignored because they demonstrated the irreparable damage to local businesses and families. A reporter stands. "Mr. Worth, are you saying your own family's company knowingly endangered public health?" "Yes." The simple word echoes through the room. "And I have proof." He gestured to the screens behind him, where Sarah's collected evidence now displays. These internal memos show a deliberate pattern of concealment, of choosing profit over people, of treating communities like obstacles rather than living, breathing ecosystems of human lives. Emma steps forward, her shoulder barely touching his, a small gesture of support that carries immense weight. "The community center has copies of all documentation," she announces. "We're releasing everything to the press and relevant authorities today." The questions come rapid fire. "Mr. Worth, what does your father say about these allegations? Will you be testifying against your own family? How long have you been working with the community activists?" Alex raises his hand for silence. "I'm not here to destroy my family's company. I'm here to save its soul." He looks directly into the cameras. "To the board members meeting right now, you have a choice. Continue down this path of destruction, or work with the community to create real, sustainable development that benefits everyone." His phone buzzes. A message from Sarah. "Dad's watching, so is the board. Keep going." Emma takes over, outlining their proposal for community-centered development. Alex watches her, seeing not just the passionate teacher he fell for, but a leader who helped him find his own voice of resistance. "We're not asking for charity," Emma declares. "We're demanding accountability, partnership, real investment in the community's future." She gestures to the art-covered walls of the community center. "This is what's at stake. Not just buildings, but lives, stories, dreams." Alex steps back to the podium. "As of this morning, I've transferred my voting shares to a community trust," he announces, causing another wave of excitement through the room. These shares, combined with those of other sympathetic board members, represent a controlling interest in Worth development. The revelation lands like a thunderbolt. His father's carefully constructed power structure, built on decades of unchallenged authority, begins to crumble in real time. "This isn't the end," Alex concludes, looking directly into the main camera, knowing his father is watching. "It's a beginning, a chance to show that development doesn't have to mean destruction, that progress doesn't require sacrifice of soul." As the questions continue, Alex feels Emma's hand slip into his, hidden from the cameras by the podium. In that touch, he feels the weight of truth, not just the corporate truths he's exposed, but the personal truth he's finally embraced. The cost of this moment will be massive, but the price of silence would have been infinitely higher. Through the community center's windows, he can see the neighborhood gathering, faces pressed against glass, phones recording, hope replacing resignation in their expressions. The truth, finally in the light, begins its work of healing and transformation. The aftermath of the press conference unfolds like a storm. Alex's phone hasn't stopped buzzing with messages from family lawyers, threats of legal action, and increasingly desperate attempts from board members to negotiate. But it's the silence from his father that speaks loudest. Emma finds him in the hardware store after hours, sitting behind the counter where they first met. The familiar space feels different now, charged with the weight of everything that's changed. She places a manila envelope on the counter between them. "The threats started coming an hour ago," she says quietly, sliding anonymous messages across the counter. "Someone's been following me home from school. My principal called. There's pressure to review my contract." Her voice remains steady, but Alex sees the tension in her shoulders. "They're trying to paint me as a radical, someone who's using her position to push an agenda." Alex reaches for the messages, his jaw tightening as he reads them. "I'll handle this. I can get security." "That's not the point, Alex." Emma sits on the stool next to him, close but not touching. "This is bigger than us now. The whole community is under siege." Mrs. Rodriguez's suppliers suddenly cancelled their contracts. Mr. Chen's health inspector showed up 3 times this week. The community center's insurance company is reviewing their coverage. Through the store window, they watch a black SUV cruise past slowly. The 3rd time in an hour. The message is clear. Power doesn't surrender quietly. "My father's behind this," Alex says, his voice tight with anger. It's his playbook. Pressure points, indirect threats, making examples of people. He turns to face Emma fully, but he doesn't understand what he's up against. "This community is strong," Emma finishes, but scared. She pulls out her phone, showing him social media posts, attacking her character, her teaching credentials, her motives. "They're trying to discredit everything we revealed by discrediting me, and it's working. Some parents are already asking for their children to be moved from my class." The bell above the door chimes, and Sarah enters, looking exhausted but determined. "The board's in chaos," she reports, dropping into a chair. "Dad's calling in every favor, threatening to expose everyone's skeletons. But," she allows herself a small smile, "the trust structure you created is holding. They can't touch the community's voting shares." "What about you?" Alex asks, noting the shadows under his sister's eyes. "Oh, I'm officially the family disappointment now too." Sarah's attempt at lightness doesn't quite mask the pain. "They're trying to use my medical history to challenge my competency, claim I was unstable when I gathered the evidence." She straightens her spine. "But I've got my own insurance files. Years of documenting everything." Emma moves to make coffee. The familiar routine, a small comfort in the chaos. "We knew there would be consequences," she says, measuring grounds into the filter. "But this level of retaliation, it's personal for him now," Alex explains. "This isn't just about the project anymore. It's about control, about legacy." He accepts the coffee Emma offers, their fingers brushing briefly. "He'll keep coming after everyone. He stops, but the word hangs unspoken between them. A text message lights up Emma's phone. Another parent requesting a conference about their child's placement. She stares at it for a long moment before speaking. "Maybe we should," she begins, then stops, squaring her shoulders. "No, that's exactly what they want. To make us question everything, even this." She gestures between them. "I won't let them destroy what you've built here," Alex promises, reaching for her hand. This time, she doesn't pull away. Sarah watches them, her expression softening. "You know what's funny? All those society matches Dad tried to arrange, all those suitable connections he pushed for, and you finally find something real in the last place he'd ever look." Outside, the SUV passes again. Inside, the 3 of them sit in the gathering darkness of the hardware store, surrounded by tools and supplies that represent honest work, genuine connection, real value. Emma's phone continues to buzz with messages, support from other teachers, worried parents, community members reporting similar intimidation tactics. "We should call another community meeting," Emma suggests, her teacher's instinct for organization taking over. "Let people know they're not alone in this. Show them we're stronger together." Alex nods, already thinking of counter-strategies, ways to protect the people he's come to care about. But he catches himself. This isn't a corporate takeover to be managed. It's a community fighting for its soul, and his role isn't to lead but to support. Sarah stands to leave, swaying slightly with exhaustion. The board meets again tomorrow. They're calling for an emergency vote to try to overturn the trust structure. She gathers her things, then pauses at the door. "Dad asked me to give you a message. He said, everything has a price." After she leaves, Emma and Alex sit in silence, the weight of that threat settling around them. Through the window, they can see the community center's lights still burning, people gathering, supporting each other. refusing to be intimidated into silence. "He's right, you know," Emma says finally. "Everything does have a price." She turns to Alex, her eyes clear and determined. "The question is, what are we willing to pay for what matters?" The answer hangs between them, unspoken but understood. The price of truth, of love, of standing up for what's right. It's higher than either of them imagined. But as they sit in the gathering darkness, their hands linked across the counter where their story began, they know it's a price worth paying. Sarah's hands don't shake as she places the final file on the community center table. The room is empty except for Alex and Emma, the late hour marked by streetlights casting long shadows through the windows. The file's label reads simply, "Environmental Impact Studies. Complete records." "I didn't just find evidence of current violations," Sarah says, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. "I found a pattern. Years of systematic cover-ups, all leading to..." She opens the file, revealing medical records, soil samples, statistical analyses. Dad's not just fighting to protect the company's reputation, he's fighting to keep this hidden. Emma leans forward, her educator's mind quickly processing the data. These health statistics, they're from neighborhoods where worth development completed projects. Her face pales as she connects the dots. Every development site for the past 15 years, Sarah confirms. The contamination levels, the cancer clusters, the groundwater poisoning. It's all here. Dad knew. He always knew. She pulls out a particular report, dated just months before their mother's death, including what really happened to Mum. Alex feels the world tilt beneath him. "What are you saying? Remember how Mum insisted on overseeing the Riverside project personally? How she spent months on site?" Sarah's voice catches. She found something big. These are her notes, her original reports, before they were modified. The implications hit Alex like a physical blow. Their mother's sudden illness, the aggressive cancer that took her within months, their father's insistence on handling all medical decisions. It wasn't just bad luck, it was exposure, deliberate silence, choice. The Richardson Project site has the same contamination markers, Sarah continues, spreading out current soil samples. Dad's not just planning to displace the community, he's going to build on toxic ground. Again, Emma's phone buzzes. An email from her principal. "They're suspending me," she says quietly, "pending review of my inappropriate political activities." She places the phone face down, her hands perfectly still. "They can't stop me from speaking out." "No," Alex agrees, "but Dad can make sure no one listens." He picks up one of his mother's reports, her familiar handwriting blurring before his eyes. He's had years to perfect this. The intimidation, the cover-ups, the systematic destruction of anyone who threatens to expose the truth. Sarah pulls out one final document, a legal agreement dated the day after their mother's funeral. He made the board sign this. A liability waiver, buried in acquisition paperwork. They're all complicit. She looks at her brother. "This is why he's so desperate to stop us. It's not just about the Richardson project. If this gets out, the entire company falls." Alex finishes. Every project, every development, every board member who signed off. He stands, pacing the room where children's artwork still hangs, oblivious to the weight of truth being unveiled beneath it. All those families, all those communities. "Mum." Emma moves to him, her touch grounding him in the present. "This changes everything," she says. "We can't just stop one project. We have to expose all of it. Dad will never let this reach the public," Sarah warns. "He'll destroy everyone involved. The community, the school, your career, Emma. He'll burn it all down to keep this buried." Alex looks around the community center, at the art supplies Emma uses to teach children hope, at the bulletin board covered in neighborhood announcements, at the space where people come together to build something genuine. Then he looks at the file containing proof of his father's crimes, of lives destroyed for profit, of his mother's sacrifice. "No," he says finally. He won't burn anything else down, because we're not going to fight him in the press, or the boardroom, or the courts. He picks up his mother's report, her last act of resistance. We're going to give him a choice. The plan comes together quickly. Sarah's meticulous documentation, Emma's community connections, Alex's insider knowledge, each piece falling into place, like justice finding its path. They work through the night, preparing for a confrontation years in the making. Morning finds them ready. As Alex stands to leave for the final board meeting, Emma catches his arm. Whatever happens, she starts, but he cuts her off with a kiss. Their first since the truth began unraveling their world. What happens, he says softly, is we honor my mother's courage. We protect this community. We make things right. He looks at Sarah, seeing their mother's determination in her steady gaze. Together, Sarah gathers the files, their evidence, their ammunition, their truth. Emma begins calling community members, activating the network they've built, and Alex straightens his tie one last time, ready to face his father not as an heir fighting for control, but as a son demanding justice. The sun rises over the neighborhood, painting the community center's windows in colors that match the children's artwork within. In the distance, Worth's Development's tower casts its shadow, but for the first time, Alex sees it clearly, not as a monument to power, but as a reminder of the price of silence. And as he steps into the morning light, he carries with him the weight of truth, the strength of love, and the legacy of a mother who dared to stand against empire. The final confrontation awaits, but the victory is already won, because in choosing truth over power, love over legacy, and community over empire, they've already changed the ending of this story.